Last week we found our way to Bethlehem with cousin Elizabeth as our guide. That brave woman who threw her arms open to the young Mary and walked with her until she was able to withstand the scorn of her society. Today we find our way to Bethlehem with Joseph, our ancestor in faith, cousin Joseph, if you will, a man whom we know very little historical fact about, but provided by his actions safety and protection. He stepped into a role that was necessary and important without ever speaking a word. What shall we say today of a man who never speaks in Scripture? What a reversal it is. The young girl, Mary, has a very big voice, and the older man has no voice. Quite a reversal. What an unusual state of affairs for biblical times. So what do we know? We know that in the earliest writings of Christian scriptures, you know, the letters of Paul were written first around the year 50, and then the Gospel of Mark, perhaps around 60 years, 30 years after the death of Jesus. And they do not mention this man Joseph, husband of Mary. It's not until Matthew and Luke, the later writings, written some 60 or 70 years after the death of Jesus, that the man Joseph comes into the story. Curious, isn't it? And from that kernel, there has come layers of tradition and folklore and stories. Today, we call him Saint Joseph, Father Joseph, Jesus' earthly father, Mary's husband. His feast day, for a feast day he must have in the Roman Church, is March the 19th. Think with me of what we know about biblical times and families, of men with multiple wives and many children. A culture where everyone needed the security of belonging in a larger unit. They called those family units. They're not necessarily biological families, but they are social and economic families. So let us imagine Joseph as a prominent carpenter or artisan, older and very established, with wealth enough, already with wives and children, perhaps many of them. In Western tradition, we think of James as Jesus' brother by Mary. But what if he is a step-brother by Joseph? Anyway, Joseph meets a young girl, already with child, alone and separated from her own unit, in danger of being ostracized or worse. He is a man of few words, but do not be deceived by that. He is a man of good conscience and an artisan's attunement to listening and being creative. And we know from Scripture, he is a dreamer. It is, in fact, through dreams that this faithful, solid man engages with God, with mystery, with creativity. We could say that he is led by his faith in hopes and dreams. And in his dreams, he is told to offer this young girl his protection. And that changed everything. To welcome her into his family fold and ensure her safety and that of her unborn child. Is it any wonder that he has become synonymous with the archetypal father? Kind, protective, sensitive to the power of dreams and the urgings of the unconscious. It is the opposite of the heretical stereotype that has been created of the strong, domineering man who is the head of the household and the one who must be obeyed. Father Joseph, cousin Joseph, is the man who can read a situation, who acts to protect and save, who listens to dreams and desires to follow up on what he believes God is urging him to do. On Friday evening, I went to the service at First Metropolitan, commemorating the 30th anniversary of the massacre in Montreal, the mass shooting of 14 young women, shot because they were studying to be engineers. But it was more than a one-event remembrance. It also drew attention to the missing and the murdered First Nations women happening right here and right now. There were red dresses hanging over the balcony all around the sanctuary to symbolize 1,200 or more Indigenous women currently missing in Canada. In fact, violence against women is so prevalent in Canada that there is a day set aside every year, December 6th, as the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women. We have a saying in my family: when we know that one of our ancestors would be displeased with an action that a family member is taken, we say, oh, they would be turning over in their grave. You know that expression? Yep. I suggest to you that Saint Joseph, Father Joseph, cousin Joseph, is turning over in his grave to find how his model of protectiveness of the vulnerable girl with child has been eroded. Oh, not by all men, of course, but by too many. How his example of listening to his dreams to hear the call of a saving God has been ignored by a society that tells young men it is weak to be spiritual. Now, this is not a sermon against men, and I hope you do not perceive it as such. It is a reminder, perhaps a call. If you will, go to sleep and just hear my voice as part of your dream. For the many men who follow in the tradition of Joseph, it is a call to speak out out to show up, to stand with the vulnerable, those on the outside, to see who needs help, to offer the kind of protection and inclusion which Joseph offered to Mary. And in reality, it may not even be a gender equation. Perhaps Joseph, like Elizabeth, is a model for all human beings, to be a force for protecting the vulnerable and the outcast, to let our hopes and our dreams channel God's hopes and dreams for a human family that will be safe and at peace with each other. This week in our office, Catherine took a phone call from the mother of one of the young homeless men who seek shelter here at St. Aidan's during the day. She just called to find out how he was. She knows he is lost and ill and off his medication, and that he is often a problem. But she called with a mother's love to thank us, to warn us, to ask us, how is he doing? I honestly don't have the answers to homelessness here in Saanich, to the mental illness crisis and the drug crisis that's happening. So, in my lack of knowing what to do so that we are safe, but we provide protection for the most vulnerable. So I'm glad to walk with my ancestors in faith, to imagine what cousin Joseph would do today, to imagine what his dreams would be for the small number who are around here, for the larger number who are in Saanich. How would his dreams call him to seek and to listen, to adopt, to protect? And what would we be as a church if we would channel Cousin Joseph, Father Joseph's way of being? Well, to him in his day, what was being asked of him seemed like a big thing, maybe even an impossible dream. But he did it, and it made all the difference. If we do it, perhaps it will also make a huge difference. Thank you for listening. May it be so.